Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV. We are live once again with our co-host, Brother Alexis Bonello, and today's topic, the problems with the modern seminary. Welcome, Brother Alexis.
Thank you, AJ, for having me back on Order Militaris Radio TV, breaking new horizons in independent Catholic media in the English-speaking world. And thank you for asking me to talk on this topic, because this is a topic which almost no one asks me about, and which nearly all men with vocations need to know before they call a vocation director. So even if you don't have a priestly vocation or don't know a priestly vocation, please share the audio and video of this program on all social media platforms, so that the men out there who are receiving the grace of a priestly vocation now can avoid decades of problems and years of being crucified by wicked men. They only had heard this program and know how to avoid the problems. And as a vocation myself, I've seen all the problems, and I'm going to give you the lowdown on what's going on in seminaries today in the Catholic Church.
Let us define what is a seminary.
Okay, so a seminary is an institution normally established with ecclesiastic authority by a diocese or a religious order. When it's by a religious order, it's usually called a house of studies, which is designed to form a man to be worthy of receiving minor and or major orders. That is, becoming a porter, lector, acolyte, exorcist, subdeacon, deacon, priest. And the purpose of the institution is twofold: to sanctify the individual in his vocation, and to teach him to be a man of God, intellectually and in his manner of comportment.
How is a seminary to be different from a college?
A seminary should be different from a college because in a seminary there should be almost the entire curriculum should be obligatory. It must be taken in a certain series, in a certain order, and not out of order. Students cannot study there at will. They must be accepted and examined very carefully beforehand. You're not free to wear anything you want or live wherever you want. You must live in the prescribed dormitories and wear the ecclesiastic dress. You can't do what you want at any hour of the day. You must follow a prescribed hourly program of your entire day for the entire student year. And in most seminaries, during the year, there is no vacation, or if there is, it's doing ecclesiastic works, like attending liturgies. And a student must have in his room only what is necessary for seminary life. It's not like a college student, you can do what you like. And there's almost no kind of social activity in a seminary. There's no clubs in most seminaries. There's no frat houses. And you don't have a team to cheer on. And of course, there's no women. There should be no women in a seminary. And it should be, not unlike a college, which is in a city or in a public area. Seminaries are usually in quiet, set apart places, or at least they should be, with restricted access to the campus to only the students and the faculty. A seminary is run by the Catholic Church, so all the professors there should be professing the Catholic faith, and all the students there are studying to become Catholic clergy. And although sometimes it's not only just for the Roman rite, it's for other rites. It's a non-profit institution in most cases, or it's a charitable institution. It's not a secular institution run by lay people. It's run by clergy, usually. And it gives a degree or a certificate, normally speaking, under ecclesiastic authority and not under state or national authority. But that depends from countries to countries due to different agreements states have with the church. Tuition, some seminaries are free and all the students go there, their tuition's paid for by the church. Others, they loan the student money and he pays back once he gets ordained, and some allow you to pay beforehand or have different kinds of scholarships and tuition. So from the financial point of view, it's rather similar to a secular school. Don't think that because you're going to seminary, you're going to get everything paid for you. That's not true in most Western nations anymore. And so in a seminary, you probably aren't going to have your own parking spot or be allowed to ride a motorcycle. You will not be allowed to have things like a skateboard or play video games in your room. So it's not just a place of institutional learning or liturgical instruction, or it's not just a monastery where you pray. It's designed to form you to become a man of God and leave aside the things of the world and of childhood. So in that way, it's very different from the modern university. Also, the courses are all about Catholic faith or the philosophical studies necessary to understand Catholic theology. So you're not studying non-Catholic things or any old topics you want. So, and your professors should be Catholic and faithful Catholics, not heretics or non-Catholics. I think that's, and you'll have Mass every day and maybe the Divine Office recited in common every day. So there's, in addition to your studies, there are prescribed liturgical functions all through the year, and that's an essential part of your formation. So a seminary is very different from going to college, although it has some things similar because colleges came out of seminaries. All colleges were once seminaries, either of Protestant churches or of Catholic dioceses.
How is someone typically selected to go to a seminary?
Okay, so typically a man has an idea. God might be calling him to be a priest, or he might want to be a priest, and so he contacts a vocation director of a diocese or religious order. And once being accepted as a candidate for them, he's then at times in his formation sent to a seminary. It might be a minor seminary at first, or then or a major seminary. So the admission isn't like you just write a seminary and say, I'd like to be a student, although many seminaries today are like colleges for example, in the United States, and they have lay students who come during the day to take certain courses because the students are preparing to become teachers of catechism or work in parishes, but not exactly clergy.
Yeah. How did the modernists infiltrate the seminary?
So modernists had already in the late 19th century infiltrated seminaries because modernist thought was introduced into ecclesiastic journals, books, and circles and pamphlets. So a lot of the faculty started picking it up. Pius XII excluded all the professors pushing modernism from seminaries worldwide, and they went to universities. And it was Pius XI who made the terrible error of allowing these professors back from the universities into seminaries. So during the reign of Pius XII, they're taking over seminaries around the world. And by the time Vatican II comes out, nearly all seminaries fall completely under control. Paul VI promoted that greatly. And since Vatican II is so obviously tainted with modernism, professors who opposed to modernism were weeded out in the name of opposing the aggiornamento, or opposing the council. So I see in nearly all seminaries today modernist control, except for maybe the seminaries where the priests are trained to say the traditional liturgy. Perhaps in them the main superiors are not modernists or not 100% modernists.
When did it become a hotbed of perversion and heresy?
So modernists made seminaries a hotbed of heresy because modernists don't believe there is a God. Modernists believe, however, that everyone should have religious feelings and that whatever you feel religiously, that's fine by you, and you should put on a good show. So modernists are very capable of being the most precise liturgical observers, and but when it comes to their own opinions about theology or morality, which they might only reveal in private or to their close friends, they don't believe any of it. Okay, it's just an act for them. And so as they gain control of faculties and rectorships of seminaries, they spread these errors in the seminary. As for hotbeds of perversion, there's probably always were sexual perverts in ecclesiastical institutions of one of the kind, but in ages past, when it was so shameful, they couldn't network because there was no way they could express their perversion. Now, since it's so open, they can just talk about openly, and so they can easily organize themselves against Catholics, even though they're such a tiny minority.
Why do bishops pick the worst men to become vocation directors?
So in ages past, the bishops chose the best men to be vocation directors because the bishops themselves were honest and Catholic, upright and straight. But a crooked bishop or a dishonest bishop or a modernist is going to choose someone most capable of destroying vocations or most capable of so annoying true vocations that they show themselves and then can be kicked out of the seminary. So in dioceses that have horrible vocation directors are horrible dioceses. You can tell that I've talked to many vocation directors in my life. For example, in one diocese in New England, the vocation director, as I spoke to him, he sat in a rocking chair and smoked a cigarette. And he asked me all kinds of questions. And the more Catholic the answer I gave, the more he rocked, the faster he rocked, and the more puffs of him he took from his cigarette. You could tell the guy was just totally unhinged and he just couldn't stand morality or Catholicism at all. But he was the assistant vocation director from the diocese. And a month later, after I got some crazy note from the assistant vocation director saying he didn't think I had a vocation, I wrote to the bishop and told him about the comportment of his assistant vocation director. And he says, "I'm very sorry you had this experience." And a year later, he removed him. A year later, after he had destroyed 4 years of vocations, a year later. So is that bishop Catholic? Well, it subsequently came out in public that he wasn't as Catholic as people thought he was. So.
Why do most vocation directors want highly educated, rich, and athletic men from a wealthy family?
Okay, so men can incline to vice just like anyone else, and even a man of God, a priest, can incline to vice. A vocation director who wants vocations like that is not a man of virtue. He's a man who's avaricious and wants rich friends, and he sees himself not as someone leading men to become ambassadors of God, but as a gatekeeper in a men's club, and he wants to improve the quality of clubs. So he wants to recruit the kind of men that he likes and doesn't want to recruit the kind of men who would belong to factions in the diocese who oppose him. If he puts a lot of emphasis on the athletic part, he's probably a homosexual himself, and he's just trying to recruit new lovers. I hate to say it openly. It might sound crude that I'm speaking so openly about it, but that's the reality of Catholic seminaries today.
To go one step further, if they are just selecting those type of people, then these men would not be priests and would not be saints. Saint John Vianney, Blessed Duns Scotus, Saint Joseph of Cupertino, and many others.
Yeah, I'd say many others. I think probably more than 2/3 of all priests who have been canonized were not great learned men. They weren't highly intelligent and they weren't wealthy, but they were holy. And so when corruption enters into the whole system of forming priests, it gravely harms the sanctity of the church and the salvation of souls, because it prevents the men whom the Holy Spirit has called to be priests to save souls from ever becoming priests, and so leaving us without good pastors, good and holy pastors who want to help our souls. We get instead worldly, avaricious, ungodly, and perverse men who want to damn our souls and abuse your children.
Yeah. Why don't seminaries get spiritual direction anymore?
Well, if you believe in God and you want to be holy and do the will of Christ and you accept all the teachings of the church, then you know it's absolutely necessary in seminary to have men like that to be spiritual directors. So you can have, so that this vocations have a way to escape the tricks of the devil, which would destroy their vocation, or to learn how to discern how to take good friends and shun bad friends. So um, it's not present in seminaries today because people there aren't for the love of God. I mean, I remember I was a member of the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate, okay, and I was a vocation from the United States. And in my monastery, which had like 20 friars, uh, no one was getting spiritual direction. No one was there to become holy or a saint. Well, why would you become a friar if you didn't want to become a saint and become holy? That's the whole purpose of it, is to become holy. And no one thought there was anything wrong about it. The little direction you did have was mostly psychological control to make sure that you were compliant and obedient, but not that you were holy. And I complained about it and commented about it. No one seemed to even care about it, even though all the books we read in the library said you should have a spiritual direction and you should be following spiritual direction. Um, and it's not just in the seminaries. I've spoken to priests who are supposed to be good spiritual directors over the entirety of my life of vocation. And I would say that 99.9% of the stuff they say has absolutely nothing to do with spiritual direction or making you holy. They haven't the faintest idea what it is, because they haven't tried to be holy. They're just there as they've been named spiritual directors because they're good at controlling the minds of other people,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's for an institute that says the Mass in English or says the Mass in Latin. It doesn't make much difference. I remember vocation from the Fraternity of St. Peter's Seminary in Nebraska, and he went for 2 years. I encouraged him in his vocation. He went for 2 years, and then he came out very much disillusioned. I don't think he went to the Latin Mass after that because he said, look, I was one of the only seminarians who kept the rules, and I was kicked out for being a rigorist, not for insisting on rules that I made up. I didn't make up rules. I was insisting that the rules in the handbook be kept observed because the rector there didn't want the rules that were in the book kept. He had the rules written to find out who wanted to keep rules so he could kick out the guys who kept them.
Mm-hmm.
That's Fraternity of St. Peter. Now, I'm reporting what I know to be this man's testimony. I believe it absolutely is true. I wouldn't otherwise because I know he is an honest man. That's not current. Okay. I'm talking about more than 10 years ago. Okay. So the administration there has changed. But nevertheless, if that kind of corruption can happen in an institute that's dedicated only to the Latin Mass, you can imagine what's going on in the Novus Ordo institutes. For example, when I was a young man, I was discerning a priestly vocation. I went to the seminary in Boynton Beach, Florida, which is diocese of, it's used by a lot of the dioceses there, but mostly Diocese of Miami. Well, they asked me, I said, can I sit in some, they weren't really, like, I came for a few days and they said, okay, go around the seminary, do what you like. I said, well, can I sit in some courses? Oh, you want to sit in some courses? Why would you want to sit in some courses? I said, well, since the purpose of a seminary is to teach, I'd like to sit in a course to see what the quality of your education is. So, well, what courses you want to sit in? Oh, I'd like to sit in the one on the Trinity. Oh, well, that's in a very advanced course. You may not understand what they're talking about. Well, never, and it's the end of the semester, so, they've already studied everything, so it's going to be very complex. Well, that's okay. I'll sit in and I'll be quiet. So I sat in this course, and the professor was saying, like, we don't know what the Trinity is and doesn't matter anything we've learned this semester, so you can believe anything you want, and it's a total mystery and we'll never know it. So you can imagine kind of spiritual directions going on in that seminary because only like 1 out of 30 students objected to that statement when they all should have if they had a good spiritual director and knew what the life of spirituality is about.
And the problems with the courses, I noticed when I was doing some research that many of the U.S. seminaries are being taught Freud.
They're being taught a whole host of errors. Freud was a sexual pervert that liked hearing about the dirty daily imaginations of his clients. And I think I read one source that he was found to have sexually abused a good number of his female clients. He's a sicko. And the first rule, we'll come to the point of how do you know a bad seminary, but if they're talking about psychology, well, okay, that's not Christianity, and it's not even based on a Christian view of the soul. But there's other things, even worse courses they teach. They teach the students that Scripture is not true and doesn't contain true doctrine. They'll teach you that the first 5 books of the Bible were not written by Moses, even though from the mouth of Jesus Christ in the Gospels, we have numerous statements where he says, where Moses wrote, what Moses said, what Moses wrote. So they're calling Jesus Christ a liar, and they're teaching the seminarians to accept that. And if you don't, you'll be kicked out of seminary. So what happens is they ordain priests who believe Jesus Christ is a liar. They actually will tell you in class, and I've heard this in pontifical universities, Jesus only said that because that's what he was told as a child, so he just repeated it. He didn't know whether Moses wrote those books or not. That's Arianism. They just said Jesus Christ is not. It's worse than Arianism. They don't. At least the Arians thought Jesus Christ was an angel or something. No, they don't even believe Jesus Christ is other than an ignorant Jewish boy. And if you don't accept that, you will be kicked out of seminary. You will not be ordained a priest in those dioceses from those seminaries. And we won't even talk about sexual morality. If you hold the sexual morality of the church, you will not either be allowed in the seminary or you'll be kicked out. A young man I knew who wanted to be a priest, a diocesan priest, I said, well, visit some of the dioceses around. I don't think you're going to find one you like, but tell me what happens, you know. So he went to one diocese in New England, and this was after all the pedophilia scandals and all the decisions of the bishops of the United States to make sure that we don't have this problem anymore. So he goes to this diocese and he talks his vocation, gets an appointment, and comes back a couple of weeks later, and he spends like 4 hours with this vocation director. And the vocation director asked him not much about his vocation, but asked him every single possible question about male sexuality you could possibly ask. And he gave all the Catholic answers. Then the vocation director 3 weeks later wrote him a letter and said, I judge that you wouldn't be fit to be a priest in our diocese. What did he just say? Our diocese is a homosexual club that feels it can rape anyone at any time they want and have sex anytime they want. We're all complete sickos. It's basically what he said. Yeah. And the Vatican, before this happened, in the 20 years before this, the Vatican had removed from the priesthood something like 50 priests in that diocese. So even after removing the 50 worst apples, they still have a vocation director that says that to young men who believe the teaching of the church on male sexuality. That's how corrupt it is.
How did the Jesuits ruin the seminary?
Yeah, most people don't know this, but the Jesuits ruined seminaries. So at the Council of Trent, because of the lack of proper education and formation of clergy in Western Europe, the council decreed that each diocese should establish a seminary. And the initial model for seminaries were monasteries. So in a monastery, you train the soul and you mortify the body. That is, you weaken your attachment to what you want to look at, what you want to smell, what you want to taste, what you want to hear. You weaken your attachment to the desire to eat the foods you like and eat as much as you want and when you want. You mortify the body to wanting to always be in a warm room or in the wintertime or a cool room in the summertime, or wear the kind of clothing you want, or sleep in a soft, comfy bed, or have a comfy this. Okay, so it's mortification. That's what mortification is. The Jesuits come around and they're like, oh no, we must accept some of the new ideas of the Renaissance and return to classical education. So instead of reading the doctors and fathers of the church in Latin, the Jesuits start reading the pagan authors in Latin. Okay, Cicero, in Greek, they read Aristotle or Plato. They start reading the pagans. And they set up an education system that still exists today. They will study everything that's pagan unto the point where you get ordained, then they'll start the Christian authors. So basically, to become an intellectual Jesuit, you would have to first accept all pagan thought, and then you could become a priest, and then you study Christian thought. Well, what does that lead to? That leads to the ordaining of pagans who just pretend to be Christians afterward. Whereas in the Catholic system, you read all the Catholic authors and you showed you were a perfect Catholic, then you were ordained. Only after ordained would you be allowed to study pagan authors because you've proved that you're a faithful Catholic, see? So the Jesuits turned it upside down. But part of that, the Jesuits got rid of the mortification of the body, and they replaced that with athletics. So the Jesuits wanted organized sports, exercise, good nutrition, plenty of sleep, all the things that are carnal. So, but what's the purpose of that? Okay, what is the purpose of that? And you see this today in seminaries. You go into seminary and they have a gym room. Even the Fraternity of Peter years ago, they had a gym room with glass mirrors on all the walls, according to one seminarian that told me. And the seminarians went in there rather poorly clad, and they, did contests with one another in seminary on how much muscle they could add. What does that have to do with Jesus Christ? I don't know. Christ crucified. But I think I do know what it has to do with. I just, for polite conversation, won't say it, but I think you can figure it out.
Yeah. While we're on the topic of all this, I know for a fact that the Diocese of Salina is a seminary they use in Denver, St. John Vianney. They like their sports. They get free tickets to the NHL Colorado Avalanche games. And like every other seminary, they like to play soccer. Why should they not play soccer?
Okay. A man who becomes a priest, or a man who's called by God to be a priest, is a man who's called to be an ambassador of God, and not just any God, of Christ incarnate and crucified. He has to preach that if you don't repent, you're going to go to hell, and your life is so full of vices, you need to repent, and he needs you to show your sins and turn you away from that. Well, how is he going to do that if he goes to Gold's Gym, eats all kind of high rich foods, does his exercise, wears his muscle tight shirts, and admires all the men like that? And why would any man who would want to marry a girl want to spend all his day watching muscle men or athletes? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, I could see if the priest got tickets to go to the opera and watch the beautiful women sing. At least that would be heterosexual. Okay. So the whole thing is messed up. And if you organize a seminary like that, who do you think is going to knock on the door and say, I'd like to be a priest in your diocese? Mm-hmm. Probably someone who will end up raping your sons eventually, because they're the easiest ones to manipulate.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want men like that hearing the confession of your sons. Because when your son confesses something because he didn't know how to comport himself as a man, because now he's becoming a man, a priest like that will say, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, when you get that feeling, come to the rectory and I'll show you. That's what he'll say in confession, and your son will be too ashamed to tell you, and you won't know about it until the police have been called and they're hauling the priest away for having raped 10 other boys in the diocese, including yours. Okay. So what I'm talking about is not just a better seminary. I'm talking what is absolutely necessary in a seminary. And soccer, if you don't know it, soccer is the sport of preference for homosexuals. It is the absolute sport preference because most homosexuals like skinny, muscular guys. And when you play soccer, you have to run around so much, you get up skinny, muscular pretty quick. And you're also very scantily clad. And if you're admiring Christ crucified and you're dedicating your life to preaching souls and hearing confessions, why are you spending 2 hours a day on a soccer field? Just as an example, the St. Gregory's Academy in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is a private institution but had a lot of traditional priests there as spiritual directors or clergy in the staff. They pushed their school saying, oh, we have soccer for 2 hours every day, and I visited there in 1999 or something like that and spoke with some of the students. They just love soccer every day, and the idea that they were in constant physical contact with their fellow male students. And then the whole scandal broke out about what that school was like. So yeah, you hear about the seminarians in Rome want to form a soccer team under the Vatican flag and play in international soccer. That says it all about the seminarians of Rome. Seminarians should be organizing pilgrimages to Calvary, or walking barefoot or on their knees for 100 miles to a shrine. That's what seminarians should be, because as a man of God, you have to lead people to Calvary so that they can be saved by repentance and penance. That's what you have to do. You're not taking the young men in the parish to a soccer game or to a football game or to a hockey game. So why are you doing that in seminary?
Yeah. How to tell a seminarian is a pit of iniquity.
A seminary. Okay. Yeah, a seminarian. Let's start with the seminary.
Okay.
So they have they have a gymnasium. They have a weight room. Okay. They have mandatory sports weekly, and it's going to be contact sports. It's going to be basketball, football, or soccer. I remember in minor seminary, they instituted that we had to have weekly gymnasium. And of all days, they put it on a Sunday. And I can't remember how many times you didn't have to play basketball, but there was a group that liked playing basketball. There was at least a half dozen times that during the basketball game, one student or another would pull the pants down on the other. He thought it was funny. Now, who would think that's funny unless he was a sicko, okay? Were they disciplined? No, they weren't, you know. The other that was the pool, you know, and you had to go in a skimpy bathing suit, you know. So what's that about? So the other thing was dodgeball. So the seminarians who wanted to inflict pain on others could do it by whipping the ball at them. So what were they training to? A bunch of sadomasochists, homos? I don't know. It was completely bizarre. I told my spiritual director, this should not even be in a seminary. And I was told if I didn't accept it, I'd be kicked out, you know, because they only want those kind of guys. So that's the first thing. In the scripture classes, it'll be taught that not everything in the Bible is of God or true or correct, that there's errors in there, and the authors of the books aren't the authors of the books. St. Paul didn't write certain of his letters, and your professor knows better than Jesus Christ what part of the gospel was actually said by Jesus and what was made up by Mark, or maybe someone claiming to be Luke, or a disciple of John who didn't leave his name, but he wanted everyone to remember the apostle, so he wrote a gospel called the Gospel according to John, you know, and crazy things like that. The class on sexual morality will not say that the sin a man can commit by himself is a sin. Pontifical University here in Rome, where I studied, the professor said, no, it was Augustine and Aquinas who called that a sin. Christ never called that a sin. So I raised my hand. I said, you implying to say that Christ taught the apostles to do that? He broke down and cried, said I had offended him, and ran out of the room. The next day, the rector said that I was at fault for psychologically damaging that professor and accusing him of the most horrid things.
Yeah, heresy.
I know, it was heresy. So I wrote the Congregation for Education, and I denounced both the rector and the professor, because the rector should have fulfilled his duties to discipline that professor, and that professor should not be allowed anywhere near seminarians again or in the confessional. Those are some of the ways. You ask if they really believe that Christ is God.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ask a vocation director in your first meeting with him, do you believe Jesus Christ is God? And he does not, he gets upset by that question. He gets upset that you're asking him questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets upset by that question, he's not a believer. Okay. He's faker. But if he gets upset that you asked a question like that, he's a control freak, and he's going to make sure that the seminary changes what you think. They don't like people who ask questions because they want to change how you think. And if you're a person that asks questions, then you're a person of intellectual fortitude that they can't ply, okay? A person who asks questions like someone who has a strong arm, you cannot win in arm wrestling. So these are some ways to know. The other way you know is just look at the seminarians. Are they in ecclesiastic dress?
Nope.
Yes. That's a good seminary. And no, then they have no intention to leave aside the world and become men of God. Do they look effeminate? For example, do they have sideburns?
Mm-hmm.
If the seminarians don't have sideburns, don't go to that seminary. I mean, there's certain, ways you can tell, are they absolute picture perfect model-like manicured faces? Don't go there because they're not men of God. Talk to some in the seminarians. If they talk like robots, don't go to that seminary. There's some kind of mind control being practiced on them. And when you're visiting a seminary, you should ask to see the entire grounds of the seminary, and they should show it to you. There shouldn't be anywhere, oh, you're not allowed to go there, unless it's maybe the faculty residence, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But everywhere else, they should not say, oh, you're not allowed to go there. They have something they're hiding, okay? So because if they trust you enough to invite you to visit the seminary, they should show you the whole grounds, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not showing the whole grounds, they have something to hide and something,
Yeah.
If they have things like movie hour every week, that means like we're disciples of Hollywood if they have a movie hour, okay? Look at their libraries, what kind of books they have on there. Ask them if they have books by Karl Rahner, Schillebeeckx, von Balthasar, de Lubac, any of the modernists of modern times, Or ask them what they think of certain famous heretics. For example, at Santa Croce here in Rome, which is the Pontifical University of Opus Dei, I had a professor who was constantly saying, Arius, our good friend. And Arius is the arch heretic of heretics. And this professor would always say, Arius, our good friend. Opus Dei.
I got some stories to tell.
What can you share, AJ?
About March 2007, I was like, military. I'm like, what the heck happened when I was little? Did that priest really ask me if I wanted to be a priest? And I was like, it's still up to the bishop. So I did. He's like, you want to be a priest? I was like, I think I was asked when I was 6. So I was like, in the vocation director, I was like, you need more education. I was like, So I go inside, we go about every Wednesday to go into town and get the mail, and I go into the post office, unlock the post box, and here's the diocese paper. I only had about a year or so of education in college. I read 3 Hispanics from a different diocese with the same amount of education accepted right away. Then I emailed them like a few years later when I still want to think I still have a vocation, but becoming more homebound. And you're like, what stuff have you studied? It's like, oh, The Priest and Union of Christ by Father Reginald Garu Laganui. Books by Blessed Columba Marmion. Let's see. Would you be able to change the words of the mass? I was like, are you kidding me? You know what Padre Pio said? The mass is Calvary. You don't change it. It's like the bishop who said, you need to shorten the length of mass you celebrate. Why? The Passion was 3 hours long, so mass should be 3 hours long. I told him all that. He's like, sorry.
Well, that is a classic case of a vocation director who's deceptive and dishonest. Matter of fact, the trick they played on you was I ran into a seminarian in the diocese of New England. They did the same trick to him. I said to him, "Oh, I see you're going to college." He goes, "Yes, I'm getting a degree." I said, "Is it your first degree?" "No, he's my second degree." I said, "Oh, that's wonderful, but um, you seem to me a kind of man who has a vocation to be a priest." "Oh, yes, I wanted to be a priest for like 20 years now." I said, "Well, why didn't you join seminary?" He says, "Well, I went to the vocation director and he told me I need to get educated. So I got my 4-year degree, and then he said, you're not educated enough. So now I'm getting my second 4-year degree, hoping that he will say that I'm educated enough." I said to him, "Don't you see that he's just fooling with you? You don't need 2 degrees to become a seminarian. You don't even need 1. He's just stringing you along because he's a lying, two-faced piece of junk." And he was such a simple man, he could not imagine that this priest was lying to him. And this priest was so evil that he was making this guy waste years and tons of money without just telling him to his face, "I don't think you have a vocation with our diocese." He kept stringing him along. That's how evil these people are. They're just absolutely pathologically evil. And what I'm saying is not just a diocese in New England, it's all over. In my life, I must have written some 30 or 50 dioceses and religious orders. I had one vocation director. He wrote me 1 year after he received my letter, and with some kind of statement like, "We don't need vocations." So I wrote him back and said, "Well, I know that because it took you a year to answer my letter."
Yeah.
So they don't want holiness. They're fighting it. So you wonder why the clergy is just going absolutely whacked out, because they don't want Catholics running the church. They want sodomite heretics running the church so that they become a criminal, parasitic mafia that controls all church property and gets you to support their lifestyle with the money you put in the plate on Sunday. And
Hmm.
that's what they've done to the church in good 90% of the world. 90% of the world.
Yeah. How should someone prepare themselves for seminary?
Okay, so let's go on a positive point. What can vocations do about it? You should prepare for seminary by discerning your vocation. We'll talk about that next. But you have to face reality. Don't live in denying what's going on in the world today, what's going on in the church, and what's going on in seminaries. If you hear this program and you say, "Oh, it can't be that bad. Oh, that's not happening, blah, blah, blah," you will be crucified. And 30 years from now, you're going to say, when you find this video somewhere in some archive, "I should have listened to them. They told me 30 years ago, and I would have avoided all the troubles and wasted years of being persecuted, run around, stringed along, given excuses, instead of joining a really good group from the beginning." So don't, you have to, it's so bad today, you must presume that every seminary is a satanic homosexual organization, cult controlling, club members only organization. You have to presume that unless you have evidence, convincing and complete evidence to the contrary. That's how bad it is. You're going to say I'm absolutely exaggerating. No, I'm 50. I'm close to 60 years old, and I have seen seminaries on both sides of the Atlantic, places of houses of study on both sides of the Atlantic. And I've heard from hundreds of seminarians and clergy around the world. I am not making it up. You must. I had a professor 25 years ago. I said to him, "What's the best thing John Paul II could do for seminaries?" He said, "The best thing John Paul could do for seminaries is shut every single one on the face of the earth down and make sure that the faculty in them never get anywhere near a seminarian again." I said, "You're exaggerating, Father." He goes, I'm not exaggerating. And it should have been done in 1975, not in 1995. And that was 25 years ago. And the thing hasn't got better. It's gotten worse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as a seminarian, if you have to feel your vocation from God to be a priest. You have to presume it is as it is. You can't go around pretending it's not. And so you must be more cautious in choosing an institute or a seminary than you would be going into a chop zone of Black Lives Matter in the dead of night while fires burned and thousands of people with knives and guns were in the street who are all black, okay, and ready and shouting "kill all whites," and you're a white. So imagine the amount of security you would need to enter that at night, okay? You would need body armor, helmet, shield, many kinds of handguns, knives. You would need years of training in military arts and self-defense. You would have to go by stealth. You know, there would be a lot of things you'd have to do to be able to enter that zone, do what you have to do, and then get out. Let's say you were going in to rescue an old lady. And you couldn't pretend it wasn't going to happen. You couldn't pretend it wasn't a dangerous place. That would be deadly. The seminaries today, spiritually speaking, are just as dangerous, and they're in just a chaotic state, okay? You even have the bishops who control these seminaries praising Black Lives Matter. So, I mean, that kind of is a spiritually confession what's going on in their seminary. The thing is, it's hard to understand because if you go to one of these evil seminaries, everyone is nice and pleasant and comfortable, and it's, oh, we want to, why are they so friendly to you? Because you're a young man and they're looking at your body as an object, as a sexual object. That's the only thing they would want you in the seminary for. I hate to say it, okay? I went to, spoke to a vocation director of one of the most conservative dioceses in like 98 out in Illinois. I won't name the diocese. And while I was there for a week to discern my vocation, we were driving around the diocese, and he, as we passed a state park, he said, "Oh, that's such and such a state park. That's where gays go at night when they want to meet other gays." So I looked at him and said, "What do I care about that?" Oh, he says, "Well, as a seminarian, you need to know that." That vocation director, like 12 years later, was found to be sexually abusing boys. And when I read it in the paper, said, I am not surprised. I was kind of got the impression that he was trying to start something with me in the car that day. So you have to realize it's a dangerous situation because there's no man more predatory, more psychopathic, more violent, more manipulative, more backstabbing, and more lying than a homosexual, right? A predator, okay? And they're just absolutely devious people. And when they become priests, they're evil incarnate. To use a metaphor, they're not really evil incarnate, but that's how they act. And they know how to detect holiness. They don't want anyone honest or near them. As soon as they detect the slightest honesty in you, you're out, no matter if you've spent 10 years and have a perfect record of obedience in academics. So don't waste your time with them because they will waste your time, okay? That's the first thing. Don't deny it's a problem. The second thing is read the lives and writings of the saints in your native language, wherever you can find them. Read them, especially the books by priests about how to be a holy and good priest. And imitate their virtues because you're going to need a lot of strength to be a priest today. Most dioceses are utterly corrupt, and you have to be willing to take a stand. And don't compromise at all. If you compromise, you're a traitor to God, and as a priest, you will go to hell even for the smallest compromise. Okay. So if your bishop were to say to you, "I don't want you ever to preach on capital punishment in this diocese. The day you do, I'll kick you out," your response should be, "I quit," because teaching on capital punishment is part of Christ's teaching, and as a priest, I'm obliged to do that. And if you don't like, well, you shouldn't say I quit. Say, no, I'll do whatever Christ wants me to do. And if you were to punish me for that, then I'll denounce you for heresy. And then since because obviously if you're asking me that, you are a heretic, and you should renounce your office right now. And if you don't, I'll denounce you to the Vatican. Well, you can't denounce anyone to the Vatican anymore because that's controlled by heretics. But just go off and, I know priests, for the slightest little homily, they were suspended. And they say, "Brother, what should I do?" I said, "Your bishop's obviously a heretic. Go and do your priestly ministry because you are still priest of the diocese in the eyes of God, and you still have your priestly authority. You haven't lost it. And you're, in fact, one of the few Catholics in that diocese. It's your priest who's a bishop, your bishop who is a heretic. So the second thing to prepare yourself for the diocese, third thing I should say, so admit there's a problem, study the writings of the saints, especially priestly things. Be holy yourself. Go to confession frequently. Go to mass as frequently as you can. Um, seek the truth about every question, okay, about the church. Don't follow the example of cardinals or bishops or clergy, whoever it claims to be a conservative, because even the ones who claim to be conservative, most of them are utterly corrupt. Okay, follow only the teachings of the saints, the opinions of the saints,
Mm-hmm.
the examples of the saints. And so be holy. Spend a lot of time in prayer, mortify yourself. And then fourth, don't rush off to a seminary. Test it until you know, or to a religious order. Test it until you know they're honest. Don't go there like, I have to meet their requirements. Go there like they have to meet Christ's requirements. Okay, because I'm not going to trust my soul and body with a group of people who could be, you know, I knew a Capuchin, he had to flee from his monastery to Italy from the US because in the US there was a rapist in his monastery who was raping one monk after the other, and that can happen in seminary. And do you think the rector will kick you out when you report being raped? No, he'll kick you out because the guy doing the raping is probably the lover of the rector. He wouldn't have him in there.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be rash to go on. You may not, but from the day you receive the grace to become a priest to the day you become a priest, the way the church is now might take 10, 20, 30, 40 years, okay? Because we have to have a restoration first, okay? We need a strong successor to Pope Benedict, and we need a complete reestablishment of priestly formation. There has to be a whole new series of seminaries. You have to completely forget about the others. They're totally lost. They'll never recover, and because it's just run by completely dishonest groups. And the successor of Benedict will probably have to refound dioceses because the dioceses have become just cabals of homosexual mafia that prey on people. So save up your money, buy the books of all the saints, be holy, live in your wherever you're living, cover your walls with pictures of the saints, seek the honor and glory of God and promote the salvation of souls. And as soon as you hear of any holy bishop of the world, go and ask him to start a formation program. If I was a young man today, I would write Bishop Gracida in Texas and Bishop Lenga in Poland. And I say, look, you can ordain priests. We need priests. The seminaries are all corrupt. Start a seminary and I'll take me as your first student. That's what I would tell them. So be serious about it and be very cautious. As for traditional orders, a lot of guys ask me about traditional orders. All of them have had horrible cases of pedophilia, okay? The Society of St. Pius X was just outed as being a pedophile protecting organization. The Fraternity of St. Peter's had dozens of priests they had to kick out of the priesthood. They were so depraved. There's been absolutely depraved homosexual masochists among the Institute of Christ the King. And the other small groups I don't know about. I know a few, their formation programs are completely bunk, you know, because they're not living for God and to be holy. They just want to keep up appearances of saying Latin, you know. And Latin is not holiness, okay? There've been a lot of holy saints in the church who never spoke a word of Latin because they spoke other languages. Latin doesn't guarantee holiness. Neither does following all the rubrics. It's why you do that. Do you do it for the honor and glory of God? A true seminary is going to teach men to convert other men from sin and turn to God. And you'll see whether the seminarians are even interested in saving souls. If they're not interested in saving souls, don't waste your time at that seminary or in that institute. Because the day you die, Christ is going to say, as my priest, where are the souls you were supposed to save? And you have to give them an explanation. People like myself, who's not a priest, or AJ, who's a layman, Christ will never ask us that question because that's not our duty. It's your duty as a priest, okay? And to all the priests out there, you need to organize, you holy priests, and found a seminary or institutions to train priests or priestly societies that are honest and upright and not run by these absolute flaming heretic perverts, okay? And if you don't, where will the next generation go to become priests? Do you want all the young men in the world to be persecuted like you were persecuted? You who have survived the gauntlet of these corrupt seminaries, found a good Catholic seminary, organize together, start a Facebook group, and then found an institute to do it. Okay? There's nothing to prevent you. Will you all be laicized, kicked out of the priesthood, and excommunicated? Don't care about that. Care about saving souls, because we will have a Pope Restorer, and he will recognize the work you do. And we will have a reestablishment of Catholic hierarchy. It's not long off now. And those seminarians will be able to be ordained. Do not fear, trust in God, because if you hold fast and are loyal to Christ before all other things, he will come to your aid because you're doing his will.
How to discern a vocation?
So the discerning of a vocation is a delicate matter because it requires knowing about spiritual things by long experience. Almost no one has the grace to of discernment right from the start. So don't read anything written by a Jesuit. They don't know a thing about spiritual direction. I'll be frank and tell you with that. Even though St. Ignatius had this great grace, no modern Jesuit knows anything about it, and don't waste your time with them, okay? Don't waste your time with any religious order that is proud and they think they know everything. You'll know you have a priestly vocation because when you read the gospel and you hear the words of Christ, your first desire is going to be, like Christ, to sacrifice yourself to save souls. You're going to admire him for that. You're going to hang on his every word. You're going to want to fulfill everything he taught. You'll agree with everything the apostles have taught and all the doctors and fathers of the saints have taught and what the faith was always used to be up until Vatican II. You'll be absolutely have a sense of distrust or discomfort or disgust with Vatican II and everything that comes after it. And you'll have the same reaction to all dishonesty, immorality, perversion, heresy, falsehood, and error. And that will be a sign that you are called by God to be one of his ambassadors because you're loyal to God. Being a priest is a vocation to be loyal, a loyal servant of the Most High. And if on anything you agree with God's enemies, you don't have a vocation to be a priest. And don't even pursue it, and don't even waste your time because you will go to a deeper hell for being a false priest. Okay. And then you have to train yourself to have the fortitude. You have to get over all the little things that discomfort you and displease you. You have to become a man, an adult. You have to have self-control. You have to learn good manners, good comportment, and a proper sense of how to present yourself, how to dress, how to speak in your native language. And you should seek some kind of learning to learn how to speak a few other languages, especially Latin. You should know your Latin because so many of the saints wrote wonderful things in Latin that have never been translated. And read up on church histories, know how things have happened. Go to the Catholic Encyclopedia at newadvent.org and read all the articles about all the popes that have ever been, so you know what's happened in the church, the up and downs of the century, so you get a good idea. That gives you a better idea of when to act and when not act, and why not to overreact, and how to look at problems today. With all the corruption in church today, a lot of people say, brother, why does that not depress you? I said, well, I've read the history of the church. I know it's been pretty bad at some times. In the mid 16th century, there was so much corruption at Milan that when Charles Borromeo at the age of 18 came there as a bishop, because the Pope had made him the Bishop of Milan at age 18, he couldn't find anyone who knew how to make the sign of the cross. That's how bad it was. And yet Milan was restored and became a city of very devout Catholics. So even if the church seems to no longer exist or have completely crumbled, it can be rebuilt, but it's going to need holy priests who have a zeal for souls. And that means they have to constantly teach the truth, the right way, and the upright way of doing things. And so they have to be absolutely loyal to these things. They have to learn these things, and they have to be willing to bear any sacrifice whatsoever, because the only thing that counts is that in the hour of your death, you can say to Christ, I have been faithful. And fidelity has been the love of my heart. Fidelity to you and to no one else. That's what it means to be a priest.
Why to be a priest?
Because you love Jesus Christ, because you want to save souls, because you realize that we're not made for this world, but for the world to come, that it's too little for a human being to have lived only so many years. God has given us a mortal soul, and that's the most precious thing that can save. Carpenters build furniture and ships, well, used to build ships of wood. Professors teach, artists paint. Those who work in metal make cars. Those who work in software write software. Construction companies build buildings. Politicians rule over governments. But all these things will pass away, and all their work will one day no longer be. But the work of a priest to save souls, that alone will remain forever. So it's if you want to achieve anything, and you really want to achieve something, then serving Christ as a priest and saving souls, that is real manliness, and that is the greatest of all achievements.
A special pledge for those with lots of money.
Yeah, so you can see we have a lot of problems in the seminaries. I myself know, and I'm absolutely convinced that we need new institutions. So as president of Ordo Militaris, I'll let anyone know, if there's someone out there who would like to donate 10, 20, 30 million dollars, our order will most gladly found the best seminary on the face of the earth to train men to be saints and to save the church. And I know enough about it to organize it and get it going, choose the right men. This is what the church needs. Doesn't need an institution that serves this group or that group. It needs an institution that will make holy men and train them to be priests, so that any bishop in the world who sees the quality of the man will then ordain him. And that's what will save the church. And I think an independent organization can do it best of all. But it would need massive financing, because you need a campus and faculty and library and all kinds of stuff. But if there's anyone listening to this program who will ever listen to this program, you call us up at Ordo Militaris Inc. in Helena, Montana, and I will most gladly speak with you for the honor and glory of God and the salvation of souls.
Oh, I'm excited for tomorrow. I just don't know what to say. Special show tomorrow. Can't wait. You'll love it.
Yeah, it's top secret. We can't say anything about it until it actually goes on the air, or actually is uploaded to the site. So, but it will be an excellent program. So you stay tuned.
Yeah.
Oh, and on Friday the 17th of July is the feast of Saint Alexis, my patron saint, and he's buried here in Rome. So I'm going to the Basilica, and AJ is going to interview me live at the Basilica. Yep. And we'll talk about courtship, how to find a girl, and how to find a husband, and how to do it as a Catholic, because Saint Alexis was involved in a terrible controversy about courtship, and that actually led to his holiness. And so it'll be a good topic for his feast day.
Okay. All right. So see you all tomorrow after our show. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Vult.
Deus Vult.